Okay, I'm back from lunch, and looks like the sun came out, so let's get back to drugs, okay? So here we are. I've drawn some lines here. Oh, what did I have for lunch? I had chili. What did you have? And my hypothalamus is not speaking to me anymore, at least for a while. So what do we got? We got these major tranquilizers, and what do we start off with is that it's way up here. That is people who are split from reality, people who have psychotic features. That is, the most common psychotic disorder is called schizophrenia, in which a person is split from reality. And so these individuals typically need medication the rest of their life. And so here they are way up here. Now, they're not so much stimulated, but think of this being way up here as out of touch with reality. And so what this does is it brings them down into somewhat of a normal range, so they are more in touch with reality. So, for example, they may have what are called auditory hallucinations, where they hear voices, but now they don't hear the voices so much anymore. They may have delusions, false beliefs, but they don't believe in them so much anymore. Got that? So major tranquilizers starting way up here in terms of split from reality, bringing them down into this somewhat normal range. Now, it's not perfect. These medications, some of the old ones, thorazine, stelazine, tofranil, and all that, and even many of these today, clozaril, have side effects that cause people's body to have movement all the time. All right, here's another category called minor tranquilizers. These are called anti-anxiety medications. So one of the mental disorders, one of the big 20 mental disorders is anxiety disorder, in which an individual is worried all the time, and their body is, in a constant state of worry and stress and so on. So by taking anti-anxiety, it then brings them down, again, you can see just somewhat of a normal level here, okay? And again, these drugs are not perfect. They all have side effects. They don't work equally well for all people, but that is a second drug category that I want you to be aware of. Minor tranquilizers, also called anti-anxiety medications, Xanax, for example, as an example of one. Okay. Now next, here we are, starting in the normal category, the normal range, taking a drug, and it brings you down then into a depressed area, which is called, of course, depressants. So there are a number of types of depressants. The most common depressant is one in which it ends up causing more problems than all of the other drugs combined. And this one, of course, is, as many of you know, alcohol. And roughly about 5% of all people who use alcohol will become addicted, will become alcoholics. We know that alcohol has a significant genetic tendency to it. So individuals. Now, this kind of fools people when they think about, well, alcohol is a depressant, so think about what it does to the neurons. It slows down that movement of the message from, through the dendrites, through the cell body, through the axon, and then jumping the synapse. So normally that chemical that would build up in the axonic fibers is suppressed with the introduction of alcohol or any depressant into the body. Okay, does that make sense? But it kind of fools people, because someone says, well, wait a minute, I was at a party last week. I saw Sally, she drank a bunch of alcohol, took off all her clothes, and she didn't look at all depressed to me, right? Well, one of the other things it does, it depresses areas of the brain, in particular, our friend, the cerebral cortex, that we know makes decisions, right? And if then our brain activity in the cerebral cortex and other areas is depressed, then we're not able to make the same decisions. When we sit in the classroom, we all look I look around at you and you all look nice and polite and so on, but all I have to do is bring in a bunch of alcohol and suddenly, your inhibitions get suppressed. Got that? So that's alcohol. But there are other types of depressants called barbiturates. 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 And barbiturates are pills then that slow you down. Things like phenobarbital and secobarbital and ambatol. Drugs then that, again, slow down the firing of one's neurons. Having worked with traumatic brain injury people for years, many of them during the first 6 months after they've come out of a coma after a traumatic brain injury are given phenobarbital to reduce the risk of seizure activity. And they have to often take it for 6 months or so until their brain gets more to a degree of healing. And what happens then is that these individuals don't feel like doing anything. And so I often got complaints from family members like, he just sits around all day. I said, well, listen, he's on phenobarbital, and it's going to be several more months before he gets off of it. So just, yes, try to encourage him to do things, but understand that this pill is affecting his body by slowing everything down. And I go, okay. Got that? So depressants. Next category are antidepressants. So what do we have? We have down here then, we're starting down here at the depressed level, right? And then we're taking a drug that brings you up to a normal range. Got that? So whereas a depressant starts in a normal range and brings you down, antidepressant starts you depressed and brings you up. Okay? Make a note that these are called mood elevators. That is, they lift a person's mood so they don't see the world so negative. Of course, the major of the 20 mental disorders is depression. Somewhere around 16 to 20% of all people at some point in their life will have a significant bout of depression. And so for some of them, they end up getting prescribed an antidepressant. Things like Prozac, for example, is one that was famous for many years. Now there's other antidepressants that help people with these what are called mood, that sometimes they have the word mood elevators, where they then make a person just see a little better their outlook, a little brighter outlook toward the world. Got that? And again, as with the other ones, they don't all work perfectly, but for some people they can, they can help. Okay. Next is stimulants. So where are we? We're starting then at the normal range, right? But now it's stimulating you. That is moving you up into, an excited state. And so what we know is that these drugs then are, of course, affecting the firing of the neurons and forcing the neurons to continue to fire, even though the body may be somewhat depleted. So examples are one that maybe some of you have taken today, which is called caffeine, right? Is a mild stimulant, but nonetheless it sort of moves you up, right? Increases the synaptic firing. But there are other types of stimulants called amphetamines, amphetamines, amphetamines. And so amphetamines then are stimulants. Meth then is, a highly dangerous stimulant because people become highly addicted to it and they absolutely cannot stop. One of the things that happens with stimulants is, of course, they affect your brain in a variety of ways, but one of the ways it affects your brain is that it suppresses one's appetite. So let's see, what area of the brain would that be focusing on? Think about it. We talked about that section of the brain. Yes, hypothalamus. So what it does is stimulants then stimulate the hypothalamus in a way that it suppresses appetite. Years ago, people would then take stimulants with the intent on suppressing their appetite. So stimulants stimulate the firing of your neurons. The problem is they can only stimulate them to a certain degree, and your body then will end up rebelling against that. And so we get what's called a pendulum effect when this stimulant drug is in your body, forcing your neurons to fire, even though you don't feel like, even though your body doesn't feel like wanting to continue, these so-called energy drinks and all that. The problem is that once then the effect of the drug wears off, and it will, you can't take it forever, then your body goes into a depressed state. It's called the rebound effect. So here you've gone up here, but then boom, you sort of come down off it and feel terrible. That's one of the things that happens with when people are addicted to meth. And like I say, meth is, some of you have seen those pictures of a person, a picture of them before they started taking meth, in the good days in their life, and then several months or years afterward, and you could hardly identify this person, right? And that's because it's so difficult to get off of meth. Got that? So stimulant.